Hello, I'm Jo, and I'd like to share my faith story with you. For me, it's more of a journey than a story because it's ongoing, and I don't ever remember a time really when God wasn't in my life. He's been there from the minute I was born, and I recognise that, and I've always felt that. But I think that's because my mother was very much a Christian, and she attended church, and she had an amazing faith herself. But my father was not a Christian, and that led to challenges, having the differences between them in their lives. But they persevered and they worked things through. So growing up, I always went to church with my mother, with whom I was very close. And we went for years, about 8 years, and then suddenly we stopped going. And I didn't really understand why at the time, but you just accept it and you don't really think about it. And life ticked along and things happened. And then suddenly, in my early teens, my father died. And it was a bit of a shock, wasn't expected. And then suddenly my mother started going to church again. And I talked to her about it and I asked her why she was going back again. And she said because it really helped her to get over my father's death and to understand things and to work through how she was feeling. And I always remember her telling me that. And I started going with her. And then that lasted for a few years, and then life comes along and you meet people and you end up meeting the man in your life, and church suddenly seems to take a backward step, and I think that's the way for most people. But you hope you come back to it when it's right. But even at that point, I still knew that God was in my life. I still believed and I still had faith. And then I got married, and 4 months after I got married, my mother died. And that was a real shock, completely unexpected. But I remembered what she'd said about my father dying. So I picked myself up and I rocked up at a church, and the church was shut at the time actually, and I knocked on the vicarage door next door and I said, I'd like to go and sit in the church and just be on my own. Would that be all right? And the lovely priest took me into the church, left me there and said, just knock on the door when you're done and I'll come and look up. Okay? So I sat there and I reconnected with God in a it's not a way you can explain it, but it was the start of a different journey with God, I think, for me. And this journey never left me. And I went back and knocked on the vicarage door and said, I've finished now. And the priest said, if ever you want to talk, I'm always here. And I ended up going to that church regularly for 20 plus years. And my children all went to church with me. But, it's strange. Although I recognised I had a relationship with God and a good relationship with God, I always felt like there was something missing. It wasn't quite right, and I never really knew why. But I persevered and I just kept going and I prayed and I found myself becoming a bit envious of friends because some of them had a sudden epiphany, a bit like Paul on the road to Damascus, when God suddenly threw himself into their lives and they could not ignore it. And that's never happened to me. And I just thought, well, I'm luckier in a way because I've always had him, whereas they've only just got him. So I carried on, and then things started to happen. And God just has a way of just nudging you into where he wants you to be. And things started to feel different at church, and it didn't feel right all of a sudden. And I ignored it, and then something else would happen, and I tried to ignore that, and then something else would happen. In the end, I realised that actually, however painful it was for me to leave my family, my church family, God wanted me to. And although I didn't really understand why, I trusted him, and I knew he had his reasons, and I just had to go with it, really. So we left the church. Not under particularly good circumstances at the end, but we left and we had a look around to see where else we thought we might want to go. And we found St Wilfrid's. And that was God's plan for me. I was always meant to be there. I know that. He sent me there because he knew that I was right. There was something missing in my relationship with him, but I needed to be at St Wilfrid's to understand what it was. So I joined St Wilfrid's, and I can only say it's been an amazing journey at St Wilfrid's. I've developed my relationship with God on a whole new level. I now understand him as a person. Well, understand him as best you can in your earthly form, but I have a relationship with him, which was missing before. And looking back, I recognise that now, that although I had faith and I believed, didn't really have a relationship with him. And it's interesting because I knew he was there and I prayed to him, and that was it. It was almost like that's what you do. But now, St Wilfrid has taught me that prayer is everything, and prayer comes before everything else. Whereas my previous experiences, it's been at the back of the queue, really, because there's too many practical things to do. But St Wilfrid has given me time to grow and develop my faith and to gain that understanding, and to help me say yes to God in a deeper way, in a more fulfilling way. And I know now, looking back, that God has always been there, always. But it's always been like a parallel path that he's walked with me. And it's almost been like there's been something in between us that's not stopped me relating to him and talking to him, but stopped me building a relationship with him. In that I talk to him, and if something's on my mind, I say to him, what do I do? And he doesn't always tell me. Sometimes he makes it difficult for me because he wants me to think about it and understand it more. And I don't always get the answer I expect, but I get the answer that he wants me to have, because he knows what I need most, more than I do. I think I know what I want, but then when he has his way in my life, I realise actually it's not what I wanted at all, and he was right all along, and he knows. And for me, it's about the trust I have with him. I know that he is always there and he will help me in his time, not mine. And it was quite interesting because last summer, before lockdown, I was at a friend's and we were having a barbecue, and we were just talking, and she's been my closest friend for the best part of more years than I can remember. And we were just talking, and she suddenly said to me, right out of the blue, she said to me, "You've had such a hard life." And my immediate reaction was, "Have I?" And she said, "Yes." And she started to list some of the things that had happened to me. And I was just like, "Oh yeah, okay." And then I changed the subject. And then later that evening, I got home and I was thinking about it, and I thought, why does she think I've had such a hard life? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, actually, I can understand why she thinks that. Both of my parents died before I was out of my teens, and I'm an only child. And there have been lots of other things along the way. And life hasn't been easy, but it doesn't seem to have been that difficult either. And the more I thought about it, the more I realised that for her, my life has been really difficult. But actually, because I have God in my life, that potential difficult path has been smoothed, and He's walked with me all the way through it. And it just is not as difficult for me as people's perception of my life. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. I'm hopeful it does. But for me, it's a journey, and I'm still on that journey with God. And I let it, since it is so difficult to explain, but I know He's there in my life, and I know He's around. And sometimes He gives me gifts, and I don't always understand them. He's always given me the gift of sight. And I've always, when people have said to me, oh, I've got a problem, I've always, and in my own life too, I've always been able to look at it and see it from all points of view, and then be able to portray those points of view. So that's an amazing gift He's given me. And it's helped me to understand a lot of the things that have gone on in my life from all points of view. But He also gives me lots of other gifts. And those are the things that He wants, and He's leading me towards. I know I've been put here to help people, and that's always at the bottom of what I do. How can I help people? Who's in trouble? What do they need? Can I help? But that is because God has given me His presence in my life, and that's such a gift. And it doesn't come free. He expects you to do things that sometimes are quite difficult, but I couldn't live without Him in my life. I just couldn't. Life is just so much simpler. Not easy, but simpler. And sometimes being Christian can be quite difficult because people expect you to have all the answers. But you know what? I don't. I don't have any answers, only the ones that God gives me. And sometimes I find when somebody's challenging my faith and asking me questions that, you know, what do you think and what should I do? I suddenly think, I don't know. And then I open my mouth and these words come out and I've no idea where they came from. And then I think, hang on, that's God talking. And He uses me as a vessel to do His will on this earth. And I don't always follow the path. I wander off, and when I look back over the years, I've wandered off that path and wandered back again. But He's very patient. He waits for me and He helps me. He doesn't nag at me and He doesn't tell me off. He's just so patient and says, come on, I'm here. When you're ready to come back to me, I'm here. And I've never wandered very far because of that, because I know He's there. And sometimes I think, actually, what's going on in my life right now? And I think, oh, hang on a minute. And then I'll say to Him, do you know what? I'm really sorry. I've done that wandering thing again, but I'm back. Please help me not to wander again. And none of us are perfect. Certainly not me. Absolutely. But we do our best. And I know that He's with me, and that's all that I ask. So for me, I guess the overarching thing is that having Him in my life has made my life easier. And yet some people think my life has been really difficult. And I found that quite intriguing, and it takes a bit of getting my head around. But I know it's an ongoing journey, and I'm really excited to see where He's going to lead me into the future. Thank you for listening.